And this is the Authority Brand Podcast. I'm your very grateful, you're very joyous, you're very happy host, Curt Mercadante. And for those of you who have been following along, we do record this from time to time live. Haven't done it in a while because, as you may know, myself and my family, we've been traveling the country. And so I'm recording this literally from the basement in my boyhood home where I grew up in my mom's house. So if you hear noises in the background, just deal with it, because that's part of the freedom lifestyle. Things are imperfect. Today, we're going to talk to someone who is living the freedom lifestyle. But before we do that, I want to invite all of our listeners. And by the way, if you're viewing this live, you too, take out your smartphone right now. Text the word UTHORITY, Y-O-U-THORITY, to the number 55678. We got a number of free goodies for you, some free webinars on authority branding. You can subscribe to the Authority Brand Podcast. And guess what? If you want to learn how to build your authority, how to deliver the right message to the right clients, there's also a button to click a strategy call with yours truly. Text UTHORITY to 55678. So now that we're done with the housekeeping, I want to welcome our guest today. Listen, a big part of building an authority brand means embracing what makes you unique, embracing who you are. So how can you embrace that uniqueness to unleash your superpowers, stand out in a noisy world, and reach your audience? We're going to discuss that today with Fraser Cameron. He's not only a good friend, he is someone who helped me as my coach to break free from a life in which I wasn't embracing my uniqueness. Fraser is an epic performance coach who helps driven men, executives, entrepreneurs, and business owners to achieve previously unthought of levels of happiness, success, freedom, and fulfillment in life, at work, at home, and at play. 8 years ago, I went back to the old Fraser. Fraser thought he had everything: a well-paying job, a beautiful family, a nice house, flashy cars, and tailored suits. But he felt stuck. And by the way, as a who grew up being a world-class sprinter, I have a feeling maybe you couldn't have fit into those tailored suits because you weren't as healthy as you wanted to be as well. You were living someone else's life. You became grumpy with family, friends, and yourself. So you took action, got clear on who you wanted to be, who you are, the life you wanted to live, and now you coach other men to do the same. Fraser, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so strange hearing your own life repeated back to you from someone. But yeah, you make a good point. Those pants and those suits were pretty tight there for a long time. Had to get them let out. Didn't fit into them anywhere near like I did, which should have been a sign much earlier than it was. But thank you so much for having me on today. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I actually just, as you saw yesterday, put a post out about you and about our journey together and what we achieved together. And it's certainly something that I reflect on very fondly, as I do with our two joint family getaways over the years. And we are no doubt going to plan future ones once the world opens up again. I look forward to the Mercadante Cameron craziness that usually ensues when we get together.
And hey, we're all about freedom. So even if they don't officially open up, I have a feeling folks like us are going to figure out how to open it up and how to travel anyways.
I think people are probably a little bit nervous right now, and it's still very, very fresh, but absolutely, I think already we're seeing it. People are going, well, enough is enough. I'm not waiting forever. Let's create something now. And I think you will see more and more of it. So,
in terms of, you and I had similar backgrounds. Corporate job, making a lot of money. We had what other people would look from the outside in and say, oh, it's successful, right? But we weren't successful. We were grumpy. We weren't living a life of alignment, certainly one that we desire and deserve. And so we broke out of it. And a big part of that is really defining who you are and who you want to be. Yeah. And when I go and I speak to audiences on branding, I go beyond, a lot of people hear brand and they think selfies and they think likes and they think views. But really, your personal brand, everyone, no matter who you are, has a brand. And you've got two wonderful kids. I got 4 kids. We have a brand to them. Every time we're doing this, we have a brand. Every time you get on the phone, every time you leave the house, you have a brand. But a brand is also kind of really who you are to yourself. You can't lie about who you are. When we talk about authority brand, because you work with a lot of driven men, executives, business owners who maybe have never thought about, maybe they've thought about it, but they've rejected that question, like who really are you and who do you want to be? So that word authority brand, what does it mean to you?
Look, for me, it really means identity. And I think what you're talking about is that so many people lack identity. They don't really know who they are. And so what they end up doing is they build a brand, and you would have seen it. They create something that isn't real, that they think the world wants to see so they can share it with the world. Whereas for me, authority brand is about that clarity of who you are, the clarity of who you serve, the clarity of message, and it's got conviction with it because it's real. It's not something you've thought was a good idea, but it's real. And I think it's then about how you share that with the world. And that too needs to be real. It needs to have conviction. It needs to be what is right for you, not what has worked for everyone else. Not, we find everyone wants to be the next Gary Vee or the next Grant Cardone or, onwards and upwards, and it carries on. And it's ridiculous because you're only ever going to be a pale imitation of them. Whereas if you actually confirm your identity, discover who you are and share that with the world, you're going to be unique. You're going to instantly be an authority brand if you can get clear on who you are and how to communicate that with the world. Like that to me, there's too much manufacturing of brand out there. Yeah. It's more about being clear on what your brand is and then discovering, and this is where you're brilliant, discovering ways to communicate that with others. Because knowing it is one thing, sharing it is another, right?
And you and I have talked about this, and I'm a great believer in the law of attraction, and you put out and it comes back to you. And you and I have had discussions about, you and I met on LinkedIn. And if you're listening to this and you're not using LinkedIn as an authority branding tool, you're missing out, right? Facebook, Twitter gets all the noise, Instagram, all that, but LinkedIn, especially if you're trying to reach business folks. People are on there, there's some yahoos posting about politics, not many. Some people aren't there to view their pictures of their grandkids or cat photos and all that. Not that there's anything wrong with any of that, but people are on LinkedIn to do business. And over the years, you and I have seen people jump in and get addicted to likes and views and how many things am I going to get? I'm going to be in a LinkedIn pod. And 2 years later, or a year later, they're gone, right? Because they couldn't figure out, like you said, they were trying to be someone else, or they were there playing business. But they had likes and the views, and like I always often tell people, those were the people who tried to take their likes and views and deposit them at the bank, and the bank wouldn't take them, right? And so you're someone who gets, sometimes the engagement on your posts is pretty low. And people might say, hey, but you're attracting the people you want because it's the law of the few, right? You don't care if you attract 100 people, you want to attract the 5 who you can help.
Yeah, it becomes a game, like the dopamine hit from achieving the likes and everything. And like you, I've had posts in the past that have gone viral, had over 1 million views and had lots of engagement, right? And the outcome is what? What does that actually mean? Yet I've had posts, I was looking at this the other day, I had a post that had 270 views and it had 4 likes and 1 comment, and it made me $65,000. So directly from that post. So I ended up, what people don't see is the direct messages you get from that. Or people don't see, I signed up a client recently, a New Zealand guy. I haven't had a lot of New Zealand clients despite being a New Zealander. But this guy messaged me and he said, I've been following you and liking all your posts for over a year now. Now, unbeknownst to me, he'd never liked the post, he'd never commented, I'd never heard of him. Been liking your stuff for a year now. Can we have a chat? And I said, yeah, what about? And he said, I want to explore coaching. We jumped on the phone the next day, and 16 hours after he first contacted me, he was a paid up member and we were working together, right? And that all, I would never have known, never liked anything, never engaged. He was that silent lurker fan. And so if I was basing my success on likes and engagement, I would have thought, no, well, I'm never going to get anything. I would have given up and walked away. But it's the times like that you go, you don't know who's watching. And you and I both know, we've both got contacts who have huge likes, huge engagement, who make no money and have no business off LinkedIn or off social media and are struggling. So there's a brand is not based on how many likes you have. A brand is based on the impact you make on others. And that's not always measured by likes, by engagement, by ticks, by comments, right?
Yeah, I want to come back to impact, but one thing that you talked about, that person a year ago started following you, and I get that all the time. One of the things I tell people in my boot camp and one-on-one clients is that consistency beats intensity when it comes to message. And I see people who try a message out for a week and then it's not working. I didn't get clients here. And if you stick with that process over time, I mean, back in, when I worked in politics, we would run ads, and it's like, at the point at which a candidate or people in the office were like, we're getting sick of that ad, take it down, was the time I poured more fuel on it. Let's put more money behind it, because you're going to get sick of your own message, perhaps, because you're the one seeing it all the time, right? But there's people out there who need to hear that time and again, and need to hear it before it sinks in or before they're ready. I mean, that guy a year earlier just might not have been at that point.
No, well, I asked him, I said, why didn't you reach out earlier? And he said it had to get to the point where I wanted change and I was ready for change, and I talked myself into it. So look, I'm big on that. And I think that persistency and that relentlessness of message and repeating yourself over and over again, as crazy as it can make you, it's needed, because it is a noisy world out there. There's so much other information out there. If ever there was the worst time in the world to consume something, it's now, because there's so much out there. So picking and choosing what to consume is hard. But repeating the message over and over and over again is the way to get through it. Gary Vee does it perfectly. It's the same message or a different theme of the same message every day, all day for years. And he's mastered that art. And I think you're right. Too many people change their message. Oh, it's not working after 5 minutes. I've got to try a new one. So as a consumer, you don't know what they stand for, because last week they were this week they're that, next week they might be something else. You don't have that level of certainty. Whereas, you think of something like Nike. We know what Nike delivers. They say the same message all the time. They don't change it. It's the same. So you know what you're getting. So there's that confidence that comes with these guys have conviction in what they say and what they do, because it's the same. It may tweak, but it's the same.
And you mentioned the word impact, which is huge. And a lot of people talk about value proposition. I work with my clients to come up with their impact story. So that one sentence that communicates the positive impact. And when it comes to branding and sales, there's a lot of people out there who look at sales almost as, I'm begging people to reach into their pocket to give me money for something that they don't really want. And so then that's why they're terrified to talk to a client, sometimes to pick up the phone. I've had people even to email potential clients. They were gripped with fear. But when you start looking at it, and branding really, I was on a podcast that aired this morning, the Ignite, I can't remember the name of the podcast. I think it's Integrate and Ignite podcast. She asked me about it, and I said, listen, your business, anyone's business, started out as a thought, which then turned into an idea, and your business is the manifestation of the idea. But really what those ideas are, whether you're selling golf balls or coaching, is how to improve someone else's life, how to make them a better golfer, if you're selling bowling balls. I don't care what it is, right? And if you communicate that on a regular basis, it's not about coercing people to buy. It's about enticing them and pulling them in instead of that push that, listen, I have something that can make a positive impact on your life. And like you said, maybe right now they're not ready for it, but in 6 months, maybe they are. I mean, if you had talked to me and you and I had met a year earlier before we did, I wasn't ready to shut down my 7-figure agency and do what I'm doing, but it was the right time. And you don't know when that right time is, so you better be consistent and communicate that impact day after day after day after day.
Yeah, but and the problem with that is that's not sexy. It's the unsexy part of what we do, right? It's that repetition. It's the doing what you need to do. And I love relating stories back to athletes. The reason why the superstar basketballer can nail the 15-foot jumper every single time is because he's practiced it 5 million times in training for the last 5 years, right? So when it comes up to it, he can nail it. And it's the same with this. It's that consistency, that relentlessness, that persistency going on about it, so you're there at the right time. So when someone needs it, that message is there. Whereas you don't know what everyone else is going through. You can't see what all your followers are doing, so you can't guess when they need it. So the best way is just share it all of the time. Continue to share what you feel, what you believe, what you know needs to be there. Share the impact that you can create. And when the time is right, like it was with you and me, The person will reach out and go, yeah, let's do it now. And that makes it easy and simple and fun.
And you mentioned, that it's not sexy, and also brought it back to sports. I mean, you were a world-class sprint coach. And a lot of times people, especially in, say, athletics, right? Well, here in the US, not in the other parts of the world, it's like people pay attention to track and field every 4 years, right? They turn on the Olympics, they see someone, they see Usain Bolt or something else, and they think like, well, this guy was natural and he just showed up. What they don't see is that not fun 5 a.m, when they're running sprints or in the weight room or whatever, but it comes down, and it's the same for them as it's process. It's daily process. And one thing that I know you still work on with your clients, but you worked on with me and I talk about as well a lot is outcomes versus inputs. But one thing I'd love to have a discussion of is something that is on a daily basis, I try to get through my head, right? It's the difference between inputs and outcomes, but also focusing on your outcomes for the day, but not getting obsessed with the results. So focusing on the process for the day rather than if you're obsessed today with the 100 meters you're going to run in a month from now, instead of focusing on the process of doing your workout today. So can you speak to that a bit? Because building a business, is the same exact way.
Yeah, I saw your comment the other day about that fall in love with the process and the outcomes, the outputs take care of themselves, or words to that effect. And I loved that. I actually wrote it down and I thought, Curt's onto something there, because we hear this expression of life being a marathon, not a sprint. And I believe life is actually a series of sprints. I believe we turn up every day and it's a sprint. And the reason why I see that is because we give our maximum effort. We maximize what we have that day and it starts again the next day. And whether the day before was great or bad, it doesn't matter because it starts again that next day, right? And I think focusing on the process is important, because when I read your message about that, I was actually at the track doing a track session. And I'm not focused on how fast it's going to make me in 6 weeks' time or 8 weeks' time. I'm focusing on enjoying what I was doing at that moment, executing what I needed to do, knowing that by executing that, the outcomes will take care of themselves. That by maximizing and putting the effort into doing what I have to do now, the benefits will be reaped further on. And I think loving and this is why I get frustrated with people who go, I'm doing all these things and life will be great in 5 years' time or 10 years' time because of it. It's like, well, we all know now, I hope a lot of people know, life is a journey, not a destination, right? And if you don't love the journey, what's the point? Yeah, doing all these things you hate now to enjoy 5 minutes at the end just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Whereas loving what you do and embracing albeit Usain Bolt will agree, I'm sure he didn't love those 200-meter repeat sessions that made him sick and he was on the ground vomiting and feeling terrible, right? But he loved training. He loved the process of going each day, being the best him, knowing that if he did that consistently for a week, for a month, for 6 months, for a year, his performance would enhance. He'd be better at what he did. And the outcome was, as we know, multiple gold medals, multiple world titles, multiple records, and things that may never be touched again. And that was certainly in our lifetime. And that was the result of loving the process and loving every day regardless. Because if we get too focused on the future, we forget to enjoy now. And I think that's where the world's gone so wrong with this fascination with retirement. I'll work hard now so I can enjoy life when I'm 65 or 70 and retire. And people forget to love it now. Whereas my point is love it now as well. Yes, ensure that what you're doing is going to benefit you in the future, but don't not love it just because it's the future. So I think, look, I instill habits in me like you commenting that you went for a sprint workout on a Monday morning, even though it was snowing, because that's the day that you do your sprint workout. So you know the benefits that come from that. So you complete it. And at the time you're lying in bed going, it's snowing outside, it's cold, I don't really want to do this. But once you're out there doing it, you're like, well, why did I ever not want to do it?
Yeah.
I feel great. I'm sprinting, I'm moving, I'm doing what a lot of people half my age aren't doing. Wow, why would I not? And the benefits of that pay off many, many times over. So I think I think where a lot of people fall down, Curt, is they don't understand the benefits of that consistent process, of that consistently doing what you need to do to get the outcomes that you want. Whereas when you see the benefits of that, it suddenly doesn't become painful. It doesn't suddenly become a chore. It becomes something that you want to do. And we all know, you and I both know, that when it's something you want to do, you'll give more of you to it.
Yeah,
you'll give all of you to it.
And the process is going through. It's not just a process of filling your day with useless inputs. I mean, over time, the good thing about a consistent process is you'll learn what works and what doesn't, and what's a waste of time, and you throw it out.
Yeah.
And without a process doing it consistently, not just 3 days, not just a week. I mean, I pick up the phone and I actually call 10 people a day. Sometimes they're new LinkedIn connections. Sometimes they're people from and I just call. And if I went into that every day saying, I'm going to close 2 deals today, my mindset, it would just be like taking a gut punch. It was like if Usain Bolt, or when you were running, if you went into every single workout saying, I'm going to break a world record today, and you didn't break it, you'd be upset. So I tell my clients, I said, you know what my process is? You know what my outcome was today? I have 10 hash marks that I made 10 calls. And now I'm calling the right people. I'm not just calling, my neighbor and whatever. I'm calling, I get up and I post content. But it's the other thing too, going back to content. If you judge it based on how many likes you have, and I'm going to get a client from every piece of content again. So a lot of people think like I spend a ton of time on my content. I go and I post my content and I move on because I don't want to deal with it. My life journey isn't to post content on LinkedIn or make calls. But I know by doing that process and moving on, things are going to happen.
I think it's getting, it was really interesting because I used to really struggle in business with process. I didn't like process. I didn't like being organized. And then someone said to me, but look at what you've achieved on the sporting side, and that's down to process. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but it was like, well, I knew what I had to do for training. I'd turn up and I wouldn't let every session dictate how I felt. And I'd go and I'd do what I needed to do and what worked. And I'd repeat the cycle. I'm like, you know what? You're so right. There's things that if you do on a consistent daily basis, it creates greatness.
Yeah.
And you need to apply that same, it's the same with relationships. You and I both know, to foster the relationship with our wives and with our kids, we need to do that work on a daily basis. We need to do the things that create that impact. And they're often, like I said before, they're often not the sexy things, but the outcomes are sexy. The outcomes are you have these better relationships, you have this thriving business, you're in great shape, and it's all these things that you do because you know that it's giving you what you want. And I think I used to be very anti-process, but the older I get and hopefully the more wise I become, I'm realizing its power in putting those habits in place, getting the foundations built, and then continuously working on those foundations is what allows you to springboard forward. Health, relationships, everything, business.
And when it becomes habitual, you're not as stressed about the process, and it's not a useless process, right? It's easy, I've been down on process in the past because I had the wrong process, or I did it for 3 days or 4 days. There was and I don't think I've talked about it on this podcast. I talked about it with some of my clients, but actually it was the football coach we talked about offline, but Nick Saban, and he coaches Alabama, very famous, I'm not a fan of Alabama, but got to respect Nick Saban. And he tells a story that when he was with Michigan State, they were getting thumped by Ohio State, who was ranked number 1. And it was like the first or second quarter, they were getting beat. And he said, you know what? This ain't working. This ain't working. Like, I'm coaching them to look at the scoreboard and win the game and win the championship. He said, I'm throwing that out the window. From now on, we are only going to focus and put all our energy, all our focus, all our passion into the very next play. That's it. I don't care what happens on second down, third down, fourth down. My quarterback may break his leg. I can't do anything about that. So they ended up winning that game. And I don't know if he's copyrighted the process. He talks about the process, and there's no other coaches that do that. Now, I'm sure they have goals to win the national championship, but they reverse engineer those, and on a daily basis, they don't worry about the next game. They worry about the very next piece. And it's just something that is so powerful, because we often think, well, I did this for 2 days and it didn't work. And you think, 2 years down the line, oh my gosh, if it doesn't work every 2 days for the next 2 years, if it's just like this, I'm never going to have a client. I'm going to be poor. It's like, it's compound interest, right? You just keep with that process.
And I think that's why so many give up. And we see it in our world, we see it in LinkedIn full stop, we see it in the world in general. You know, if people don't have that instant success, if they don't have that instant outcome, they give up. And that is why you see so many people disappear, and they hold off strong for a message for 3 days. And it's that consistency. And it's when your mind is so much on the future that if you don't get there instantly, you give up because you don't think it's going to be worth it. Whereas I love the Nick Saban approach. If your mind is on the next play, if your mind is on executing the play that's in front of you, you know, then execute that and then go on to the next thing. And it's the same with this process. Execute. You with your 10 calls a day, make your 10 calls a day, then move on to the next thing. Then the next day, do it again. And it's that consistency that allows you to achieve those amazing outcomes. It's the doing what you need to do on a daily basis. And that's where most people fall down. They won't do it. They see the outcome and they want that now. They won't do what needs to be done now. Why was Kobe Bryant able to make so many game-winning shots? Because he took so many shots in practice. He did everything. He did the work. He didn't just turn up one day and think, well, I'm going to make it. And that's the difference between sustainability and instant success. And the post-like, the vanity metrics is really measured and gained around that instant success and that instant gratification. Whereas you and I have both been in this game long enough to know that sustainability comes from turning up every day and not worrying about the short-term play, but knowing that by doing the short-term work, you'll achieve the results over and over and over again consistently.
And some people are engaged in the process, but they're filling their days with BS, right? Because they haven't reversed engineered it to today or tested. I mean, you know, if you're training for the 100 meters and you just keep running like mile repeats every day, and you're like, I'm not getting any faster. It's like process doesn't work. I'm giving up on process because it's like, well, you're doing the wrong. You're not doing the right thing. You know?
Yeah, I think testing in life is vital, right? Trialing something, seeing how it works, and then adapting it for you. Like you and I have done, we've talked about this in the past, with diet, with exercise, with all those sort of things. Like it's testing and having a process that you do test it, and then you go, okay, I'm going to keep that, I'm going to change that, or I'm going to add this one into it to refine this, and you're continuously improving and continuously enhancing what you do. But it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater every 5 seconds and starting again, because then you never make progress. You never get, and you and I have seen this enough with colleagues and peers that we've seen on social media, is that it doesn't work, so they throw it out and they start again, and they continue to repeat that cycle over and over again. And then they come to you and they go, well, why are you doing well and I'm not? Well, it's doing the simple things over and over again that and having that clarity around who you are and what you want and where you're going, and then executing it daily is why I'm where I want to be and you're not quite where you want to be yet. But don't keep on throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Keep the baby in there and just run a little bit more hot water in there perhaps, or add a toy, or doing all those things that just creatively working on what you've got. And that's why having good people around you, or great people around you, to give you suggestions, to give you guidance, to give you hints, to give you ideas is a differentiator.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with obviously adapting as you learn, but many of those people haven't clearly defined the finish line, like where they want to go. So they end up throwing spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks. And they think that's adapting. There's a difference, right? If you're not moving toward your goal, then you can adapt and learn. But if you don't even know what your goal is, then it's just chaos.
Well, then you end up being busy or productive. And all productive means is you're finishing what you're starting. It doesn't mean you're doing what you should be doing. Rather than being purposeful, rather than having intent with all that you do. You don't make 10 calls a day because you've got nothing else to do, or because someone told you it was a good idea. It's because it works. Right. And you keep doing it, and it's taking you towards your goal. You've got this picture here that you're working towards, and you know that today you've got to do this, because by finishing that, you'll be that much closer.
And if it works, if it works for 2 weeks and then doesn't work for 2 weeks, I look at the data and say, well, why I was calling a different type of person and they were, and all that. So I'd love to get your thoughts on something as it relates to, well, performance in general, but also in business and, well, in anything really. So sprinting, right? And a lot of people, I've been studying a lot the Tao Te Ching and the principle of Wu Wei, which is roughly translated effortless action. And, you see a lot of people, like, they think the 400 meters, people, the sprinters are jumping around because they're pumping themselves up, but in many ways, they're actually loosening themselves up. And Hugh Jackman was on Tim Ferriss recently. Great interview. And he was talking about this principle, and I can't remember who he said, but it was a person who said that if you really want to perform at your best, go at 80%. Tell yourself you're going at 80%. And they did this study with sprinters, the sprinters who said, I'm going to do 100, 110%, actually tensed up and did slower. But the ones who said, just go at 80%, they were timing them, went faster because they were looser. And that principle of effortless action, when you look at the top sprinters, right? They're not tense when they're running. When they slow it down, on TV in the Olympics, you see their cheeks, flying around and everything. How can you apply that principle of almost effortless action and flow?
I love that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. To business, to your daily life.
I love that you use the word flow there at the end, because that's what it is all about. It's having, not surprising, trust in the process. The reason why Usain Bolt looks so relaxed is because he knows he's done the work. He knows that he's done all he can to be there. And he also knows that a relaxed, calm muscle will move so much better than a tense muscle. That he knows if he gets desperate, he will run appallingly. As he did in his last race with a hamstring injury, and he was struggling and he tried too hard and it didn't go well, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when we saw him at his best, he was relaxed, he was in control, he was in flow, right? He knew what was in place. And I think it relates to so much of what we do. And part of that comes from repetition, doing something enough that you have confidence in it. I was actually training a young group of sprinters. A former athlete of mine called me in to help with a high performance squad because they were having some troubles. And I watched these 6 athletes do a sprint, and the look on their face, they were tense. They were like this. And I was like, I know I'm sprinting well when my cheeks are bouncing up and down, when I've got relaxation in my cheeks, because you won't be relaxed in the rest of your body if your face isn't relaxed. Like the face leads everything that you do. So it's the same with business. If you get stressed, if you get tense about having to make something work and you try so hard, chances are that it comes off as desperate. People can tell it, people can smell it, people can see it, and you force things that aren't right. Whereas when you're in flow, the things just happen. But they don't just happen out of luck. They happen out of design. It's because you've created a process that results in the outcome that you want. Usain Bolt practiced that so many times that he knew what he had to execute. So when he lined up, all he was thinking about was going through his checklist. I remember reading a great book, Slaying the Dragon by Michael Johnson, and a sprinter from our era, Curt. And the book is all about how he failed miserably in the 92 Olympics with food poisoning, didn't execute, and how he had to do what he had to do to win the double. First of all, get the organizers to allow him to run both with timing for the 200 and the 400 and the 96 Olympics in Atlanta. And he talks there about everyone would look at him at the beginning of a race and he'd look focused but calm. And they said, why? And he goes, well, I knew that if I went there and executed what I needed to execute, I would win, because it was all under my control. I had to do what I'd trained to do for all those years and just tick off the box at each phase of the race. So he was always in control and he always looked in flow. And you and I will remember he was pretty unbeatable there for a period of 7 or 8 years, especially over the 400 and also over the 200, just in control, because he had that control. He executed that. So for me, it's about those small habits that create amazing outcomes, repeating what you know works, testing to find out what does work first, or learning from others that have done it, and repeating it on a continuous basis and not forcing it. It's the same with branding. Like if you force your brand on the world, it's not going to go down well. Whereas if you are clear about it and you put it out there and then it builds from there, having confidence that it's the right thing, having belief that it's the right thing, and then doing the work to get it out there, I think it then works for you. If I force training now at 43, it never ends well. It ends in sore muscles. It ends in me quitting the session early because it just feels awful. Whereas if I go there and I relax and I have faith knowing that I'm just applying what I've learned over 43 years, I know it works. I've just got to have faith. It's amazing the impact that has. And I vividly remember one of the best races of my life. I was racing against all these top British athletes. I was living in the UK. It was appalling. Sorry, UK listeners. It was appalling weather. Typical UK. It was cold. It was wet. Middle of summer. And it was some of the top guys in the world. Now, I'm not going to say I beat them, but I was ahead of them after 60, and I ended up running my fastest time ever because they pulled me through when they went flying past me. But I remember lining up in that race, and I remember I ran a really good first 40, as I always did, and I was thereabouts. And then I started to fall back a bit. And I remember thinking in my head, it was like slow motion. I'm forcing this. I've just got to relax and let it flow. And I can't expect, even though it was only over 10 seconds, I can't expect for that change to result instantly. So I've got to make that change and then have faith and confidence that it will flow on into performance. And I remember it was at about the 50-meter mark. I made a change to something I was doing, and it didn't have an instant result. But what felt like hours later, it was like a second later, suddenly I had a burst of speed. It felt like the others weren't really moving, and I pulled up closer to them and ended up running this great time. And it was like having faith to execute something, knowing that it won't necessarily result in instant change, but it will result in ongoing and sustainable change following that. And so I think it's having confidence in the outcome and not forcing every single thing that you do all of the time, because then you get tense. Whereas in the race, I was just like, I know this is going to work. I know that I'm going to improve my performance in the latter part of the race just by executing this, but I can't rush it. Ironically enough, in a sprint where you think everything's a rush, but like you say, Usain Bolt never looked like in a rush. Looked like he was out for a Sunday drive with a cup of tea, like It really did. And yet he moved so quickly. And so it's like, if you want to move faster, slow down. If you want to achieve more results, slow down. Really execute what you need to do. Focus on those specific few things, knowing that they will have flow-on effects. And as we know, life and business and sport is a long game. You know, you've got to do the things regularly to be able to have that performance. So it's not forcing it, I think, is the key, is doing what you need to do to ensure that the momentum's there, and then letting the momentum take care of itself. So it's like the snowball, you know, like if you force it, it will go off track, it won't go anywhere. As if you add a little bit of snow to it every time and give it a gentle tap, it will roll down that mountain at considerable speed. So it's doing those small things.
And you know, I've seen people react to some of your posts in talking about this, and mine as well, when I say things like work-life balance is BS, and you talk about busy being the new stupid. And what people misunderstand is Usain Bolt was in a state of flow. He had focused on his process, probably didn't do a lot of extra, right? Because excess you can overtrain, you can do those sorts of things. Like you said, when you force it. But people will react. He worked hard, and like, you can work smart and get into flow while working hard, but you got to work hard on the right things. And I guess that goes back to process. But so many people with business, or when it comes to branding and sales, they fill their days with BS, and you know, it doesn't work. Nothing works. It doesn't work, and then they give up.
I think for me, like I get frustrated when I hear terms like work harder and work smarter, because the connotations with that, I think people don't get. For me, it's work better. And someone like Usain Bolt nailed that. Like it's working the best you can, knowing who you are, knowing where your strengths lie, and you'd relate to this with your Gallup background and everything else, knowing where your strengths lie and emphasizing those, maximizing those. So working better. Because otherwise we end up with the hustle and grind culture that you and I both despise, because people will just go, well, all I need to do is work longer than everyone else, or work harder than everyone else, and I'll achieve. It's like, well, no, you're missing the point. And then other people will go, I need to work smarter. And it's like, there's an element of that. It's better than working harder, but still I think working better is the where we should be targeting. And Usain Bolt will admit that by the end of his career, he was a much better worker than he was at the beginning, because he learned what worked and what didn't, and where he should put his effort and everything else. And he was able to sustain that performance over a longer period of time because he got better at what he did. So if we're not looking at constantly improving who we are, constantly improving how we do things, then we end up having to work harder because it's the only way of overcoming the inertia. Whereas if we enhance what we do, you can actually, and you and I are both big proponents of this, you can actually do less and achieve more. And you say this to the unbelievers, and they question you and they call you lazy, and they say you don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, well, no, I've studied high performance in all areas for 25 years. It works, because high performers always have, and it's often a trick in the mind, but they always seem to have more time than anyone else. And it's because they do less and achieve more.
Well, I'm glad you went there, because that was where I wanted to go with doing less to achieve more. And a few weeks ago, I had a potential client say, well, yeah, you teach a process, but I don't have 4 or 5 hours a day to do marketing. And I'm like, do you think I have? Let me talk to you. And so that day, he was my second follow-up call. I call it an interview call, right? I did a whole bunch of other calls, and I said, listen, if you request a proposal from me, you're going to be the third proposal today. So I will have 3 new business proposals out this morning from calls I made this morning. It was almost noon. I said, when I'm done with your call, if you want a proposal, I'm going to send you a proposal. And then I'm getting up and I'm spending the next 4 hours on the lake with my family.
Yeah.
So, that do less do less to achieve more. I mean, you and I live the freedom lifestyle. You're in New Zealand now, back in your homeland, but you were traveling around France for several years. We met up, we traveled with our family. Right now, my family and I, we sold our home, most of our possessions, and we're traveling. And when you build a true authority brand around the right process and working better, you have more time, you achieve more, and it fuels your freedom business, which empowers your freedom lifestyle. And it all works hand in hand, where, I mean, right now we had been going back and forth on this, and, usually at 3 p.m, I'm not doing anything related to work. I don't consider this work, but usually by noon I'm out and we're out with the family doing something. Again, it's not about being lazy. It's about living the life you want. And to do that, you've got to build a business that doesn't take up. And by the way, I know someone who works 19 hours a day. He should be retired now, but he loves it. He loves it though. And his kids are grown, and he just loves picking up the phone and calling, and he spends time with his wife, and he just loves doing it. That, there's certain people, there's 2 people I've met in my life who like waking up in the morning and picking up the phone. He's one of them, and he just loves it. So there's not any set amount of time, but once you define it, you can build what you want. But the key there is performing well, having a process that works, building that brand and that sales process that allows you to fuel it.
Yeah, and the very first key to that is stripping away the unnecessary. You and I have talked about this in the past, stripping away the unnecessary fluff. Usain Bolt didn't run middle distance to get fit. If he had, it would have wasted his time and energy. It's like a businessman that specializes in an area shouldn't spend 4 hours of his day doing something that's not adding value. Be purposeful in all that you do. And look, I think I know who you're referring to in that statement. And, if it's what you love doing and it's not getting in the way of the life that you want to live, then whatever. I'm not going to force my ideals of a 2-hour workday on someone else, because someone else may love what they do and want to do more of it. Whereas for me, I love what I do, but I also want to spend time with my family because they're younger. Our kids are similar age to yours, so you want to interact with them. But I may think very differently in 10 years' time when they've left home and doing something else. Who knows? I think it's, for me, defining what matters to you and what's important to you. And for me, that true success, which is a life you wouldn't trade for anything, that's what you aim for. And that, how that looks will vary from time to time. It will look different when your family's young than when they're older. It might look different. Things happen, and it's okay to evolve that. But it's stripping away the fluff. It's not wasting your time. And people, I get the same comment with you. Why would you want to spend the time relaxing in the afternoon at the beach with your kids or stuff? And I'm like, well, that to me, it's not wasting my time. It's how I want to invest my time, because I get so much joy from that. It helps me stay fit and young. It helps me stay active. It helps me get to know my children. It helps me create moments with them. Those are the things that matter to me. And I know they matter to you as well. Yeah. But getting rid of the fluff. I used to work like you, long hours in the day, and I thought that was the only way. Now I can't believe I did it for so long. Now I've seen the other side and know that there's a better way of doing it. It's like, why did I not see this earlier? I'm just grateful I saw it before it was too late.
And there's a difference between being busy and having your days full.
Yes.
Having your days full and you get stuck in quicksand. So it's not about, like you said, the hard work, but if you're not doing the right stuff. But I think conformity is powerful. We get addicted to it. And I think we're seeing right now with what's going on in the world, the result of an overinflamed, stressed out culture that doesn't take care of itself, doesn't focus on wellness. And a big part of wellness, I did I shut down the Freedom, my previous podcast, Freedom Mindset Radio. And one of the final episodes I did was I said, listen, I've been guilty, hold me accountable. I've separated out the terms mental health and physical health. Yeah. There is no difference, but we separate it out here. And a big part of that is doing what you love. And, the title of this is How to Stand Out in a Noisy World. I was a client of yours, but there are some people out there who I've never even asked you if they're clients, but I can tell they're your clients, right? Because sometimes you'll tag each other in the posts, but I can tell what they're doing now. And all of a sudden they're walking at the beach and they're saying, I never did this before. And you start to radiate that out. It's what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast in terms of you're putting yourself out there and you're radiating. I listened to a podcast that had to do with, it puts out by the Taoist Institute, and it's about the Tao. And one of the guys is kind of a comedian who sort of knows the Tao, and the other one is an actual like Taoist, expert. I don't know if he doesn't want to be called an expert, but they were talking about that and trying not to force, like you said, force your brand on someone. And he used the example. He said that he had a relative who once sat on a plane. I think it was while he was in politics next to Ronald Reagan. And he said, I don't know what it was, but he just exuded a joy of life. Like you felt it. And I've heard people, I'll be bipartisan here, who said that about Bill Clinton. Like when you were in a room with him, you felt it. Whether you like Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton or not, there is something out there that radiates. And I mentioned law of attraction, but standing out in a noisy world sometimes isn't beating people over the head with it. It's defining who you are. So how do you help your clients stand out in a noisy world without being like hedonists, or the types of people who are constantly taking selfies and coercing you and forcing it upon you?
I think that one of the most important things is not trying to please everyone. I think one of the reasons why so many struggle to stand out is because they're constantly trying to appeal to the masses. They're trying to be populists. And interestingly enough, that you mentioned Clinton and Reagan, because neither of them were trying to be populists. They both had specific agendas that they wanted to get out there. And whether you agree with their politics or not, you can't deny their success and their achievements. And I think, so for me, it's about, I care about what other people think, some more so than others. Those close to me I really care about, others less so. But I don't worry about what they think, because I'm here to do me, and that will attract some people and it will repel more people. So it will, by standing out and being you, those who want what I have, those who like what I say will be attracted towards me. And those who don't will disagree with me and shout and yell, and that's cool. I'm fine with that. I don't agree with everything other people say. It doesn't mean I can't interact with them and everything else, but I think it's really important to own who you are and not worry about appeasing the masses. I think that the conformist society has made us all sort of imitations of each other, and so we end up living someone else's life. And I think the key to standing out is to live your life, not worry about what everyone else is doing. I mean, I know you, like me, battle with wider family members who think we're crazy for doing what we're doing. Right. But I don't let that stop me, because I love this, the way this makes me feel. I love the way my family grows while we're doing it. I love the buzz I get from it. So for me, it's about really determining who you are and then embracing all of that, despite what people may say. They call it trolling in social media. Despite what the trolls may say, what the naysayers may say, it's like not letting that hold you back, because you're not here in your life to make everyone else happy. You're here to create impact, to do those things. And the best way to create impact is by being you, rather than trying to be someone else. So I mean, not all of my clients walk along the beach during the day, although most of them do. It seems to be a bit of a calling card. Yeah. It's people who want to do less and love the feeling of the sand beneath their toes, or the wind in their hair, or the, in forest, whatever it may be. And I think it comes down to just really having that clarity around what matters to you without being influenced by what everyone else has. And I think that the noise in the world is all about, at the moment, you and I know this, it's hustle and grind. It's you've got to do more. You've got to get up at 5 and go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, so you only sleep for 3 hours. You've got to do more than everyone else. You've got to go through all these things. You've got to sacrifice personally. You've got to go without. Your family might not see you for months on end. So, wow, if you want to stand out, actually, and you don't agree with that, just say you don't agree with it. Don't be afraid to speak your truths. And I think you and I both struggled with this personally. I know this from getting to know you, and I know my own experience. I struggled with that for a long time, to speak my truth, because I was worried about what other people would say, because it was different.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to be different, right? It's how we grow. It's how we learn. It's how we finally step into who we are. And the only way you do that is by breaking from conventional wisdom and breaking from the status quo and trying what you like, as you guys are doing now with your family in terms of traveling around America and trying. You won't know until you try it. You might do it for 6 months and then go, no, actually what we want is a hybrid of what we used to have and what we're doing now. But you won't know until you get out there and do it, right?
And it's, you mentioned some of the things, we homeschool our kids, and some people think that's right or wrong. And I long ago, and I told Julie, my wife, I said, listen, it's not our job to debate people and convince them of what we're doing. If we live our lives and exude a joy and a freedom, other people will see that. And there's a certain amount of people who will lash out because of envy.
Yes.
But then there's a certain amount of people who will say, all right, like with homeschooling, it's like, people who would never talk to you about anything, religion or politics. If you tell them you homeschool, oh my gosh, well, how do they get this and socializations, whatever? It's like, why don't you go have a conversation with our kids? See how dumb they are. See how stupid they are. I don't have to. So if you live that life, going back, you don't have to coerce people into your brand. They see you living it, which is part of authenticity, right? I mean, I had a client who jumped in, and you'll love this. I don't think I ever told you this. They actually asked me a question. And this was March. This was right around COVID, when I don't think the travel bans had it. And they said, when was your last vacation? This is a question a client asked me. And I said, well, it was December. We went to London for a week for the holidays, and we have this, and this planned. And this was right before COVID. And I said, well, that's a great question. Why'd you ask? They said, you talk about living a freedom lifestyle. We wanted to make sure you weren't full of shit. And it's that authenticity of people can see us living it. Joe Peachy, who's my sales mentor, he makes 150 outbound sales calls a week. He does it and he lives it. And now he claims he doesn't have a brand, but he does. You know why? I was driving last year to Lake of the Ozarks. We went for a vacation last August, and I was listening to one of Joe's podcasts, and he was talking about the importance of quick follow-up with potential clients, and talked about, listen, I always call someone back within a day, da-da-da-da-da. And at the end, like I did, he gave out text blank to blank on your phone. So I texted it while we're driving. It was a 16-hour drive,
Yeah.
2 minutes later, I looked down my phone, Orlando, Florida. I said, you gotta be kidding me. And I picked it up. I said, is this Joe Peachy? He said, yeah, how'd you know that? And I just started laughing. And he claims he doesn't have a brand. I said, but you do, Joe, because you do what you say you're going to do, and you live the life you're living. Yeah. And isn't that in and of itself a way to stand out in a noisy world?
Yeah, I think it's showing rather than telling. Yeah. And we know this as parents. You tell your kids to do something, they may or may not do it. You show them, they will do it, right? So there's so much power in showing. Everybody is telling us what to do on social media and in the world, right? Very few are showing us. And the ones that stand out are the ones that show, right? Because talk is cheap. In fact, it's free. Anyone can tell you what they're going to do or what they plan to do or everything else. It's so much harder to show, because then you have to have done it, right? You have to have walked the walk. You have to have done that. And I think, to me, how to stand out in the noisy world? Show. It really is. It really what it is comes down to. It's show by doing it. And I think that is, we all absorb so much more by observing and by doing stuff than we do by hearing it. All right. We will go out there and implement. And you just gave a great example there using Joe that, he's showing. He walks the walk. He does what he says he'll do, and he executes. And that to me is a brand. Like, he's showing the world who he is. You can tell the world until you're blue in the face, but if you're doing something else, the world will quickly cotton on. Go,
He tells a story that someone was at his boot camp, went through the whole boot camp, went up to them, closed his book at the end of it and said, "This was an incredible boot camp. I'm convinced it all works, but you are all crazy and I'm not making that many calls." And it was like, I'm just not going to do it. And it's fine, right? There's some people who are going to be like, "That's great. That's not for me." And that's fine with doing it, but you can't be afraid of you can't be vanilla, right? That your goal can't be to vanilla and appeal to everyone, because when you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one.
Or you just take the populist approach and you compromise who you are and you compromise all your values and compromise what you want just to absorb with the masses, and that doesn't end well.
Well, Fraser Cameron, thank you so much for being a guest on the Authority Brand podcast and joining us live here. If you are watching live, please tell our listeners, and we'll put it in the show notes. We'll put all these links in there. People want to get in touch with you. People want to hear more, to learn more about you, or people are like, "Listen, this guy said it all. I got to know how to work with him." Where can they go?
Absolutely. So look, I will put some notes in there. I've got a really cool short ebook about 5 ways to kickstart your journey to peak performance that are things that people can implement right now. I'll include some links. You can always go to the website, www.frasercameron.com, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'll put the links in, but please feel free to reach out, even just to have a quick chat, and I can give you some pointers to how you can enhance your performance, achieve peak performance, and ultimately start living the life that you wouldn't trade for anything, because that to me is true success. And when you can achieve that, as Curt has, and you can see the benefits of it, because look at the smile on his face right now. It's sort of, there it is.
There you go. Well, Fraser, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everyone for listening. This has been the Authority Brand podcast. I'm your host, Curt Mercadante. We'll see you in the next episode.